Hello YouTube, I'm Efren225 and today I am going to teach you how to make a support system for your SRPG Studio game. Now, the support system is of course the system from the Fire Emblem franchise that allows units to interact with one another and have a conversation and get a relationship bonus as a result. A great way to increase the amount of characterization and also allow you to build up bonuses for units to get when they are fighting near each other. Now, this system is very difficult to implement in SRPG Studio. Well, it's not difficult to implement, but it can be very tedious to implement without a plugin. I'm sure there are plugins that allow this system to be implemented with much more ease for the developer, but I'm going to show you how I did it in my game without any plugins. And even if you don't end up using this method in your game, by following along you can get a decent feel for how some of the operations in SRPG Studio work. So to begin with, the way support systems work in Fire Emblem is that typically there will be a counter that increases when a certain pair of units are fighting with one another. Depending on the what game you're in, it can be counted as the number of battles they've participated in, whether or not they're near each other when they make an attack, things like that. I'll go over how to implement a couple of the different systems across the series, but I am not going to show you how to implement every single system because Pair Up hasn't really been implemented in SRPG Studio, even with plugins. So obviously we can't do it the Awakening way quite yet. And again, if there is a plugin that makes all this easier and does implement Pair Up, then by all means use that. But we're going with no plugins and just whatever the default functions are. So I've got the sample game opened up here. This is a sample map that the software comes with. We're going to go to the database here. Now, first lesson, if you want to implement bond supports, which are a function that were first implemented in Mystery of the Emblem and later Thracia 776. So you go into your players, which is where all of your characters are defined. You go into details, this window opens up, and you can see that the sample game already has some supports set up. So these are the bond supports. They are simple, flat bonuses that the units get for being near one another. And you can see that you can set how much power, how much defense, how much hit and avoid they get, how much crit and crit avoid, what unit the unit receives the bonus from or gives the bonus to. I'm actually not sure. And you can also see that there are two conditions that you can set for when the bonus is applied. Switches, which allows you to choose a global switch, that's an on or off switch, very similar to RPG Maker. And you can look for a specific variable in the game to be equal, less than, or greater than a certain amount. So the switches and the variables are how we are going to create our support system. And and another thing I should mention is that if you go into config2 in the database window, you can set, where is it? I think it's on this screen, support range. Support range will let you determine how far the units can be away from each other and still collect the bonus. So normally it's 3, so if the units are within 3 spaces of one another, they will get their support bonus. Now, I'm going to warn everybody one more time, this can be very tedious to implement due to how many variables and switches you need to work with. So the first thing you want to do is, for your game, determine how many supports you're actually going to have. How many conversations per pair, how many pairings in general. My game had 225 total conversations for 75 different pairings, so that was a bit of a pain to implement. Also, you want to determine, before you start work on all of this, what kind of limitations you want to put on the system. How many conversations the unit can have in total, how many, whether or not they can only get one S support or not. Anyway, so once you've got all that figured out, go into your database, go into config, and go to system variables. Now here you want to create one variable for every possible pairing. Yes, I know that's going to be a lot of variables. I had to work with 75 of these. You can see that in the variable window here, there are 5 kind of like folders for variables. There's no real difference between any of them. It's just like if you want to organize them a little bit, maybe have all the support variables in one folder, that's something you can do. So we are going to make this variable called Helen slash, I forget what the character names in the sample game are, but Helen slash whoever. And the default value is what the variable starts at, is going to be 0. You can set a maximum if you want. Doesn't really, I don't think it matters too much. The description will never be displayed in-game, so you don't need to worry about that. And if you are putting a limitation on the total number of supports that a character can have, you also want to create variables for those characters. So Helen's support limit, and the variable names can be whatever you want, but it's highly recommended to make them something that you will recognize on site, because like if all of these variables were just named new variable, new variable, new variable, that would be completely awful. Secondly, you're going to want to go into global switches. You need one switch for every possible conversation the character can have. So if we want, like let's say we have 3 conversations for Helen slash whoever, we're going to have Helen slash whoever C, and you can copy and paste these to not have to type as much, and then B, and then A. And again, if you are putting a limitation of some kind on however many conversations a character can have, you will want to make global switches for that as well. Support max and whoever support max. So yeah, just for one set of conversations, we have 5 switches and 2 variables. So you can see how this kind of gets a little bit out of control. And global switches don't have folders either, but you can click on a variable and then just drag it wherever you want to organize it that way. All right then, so we've got the variables, we've got the switches. How do you track however many support points the units have? Well, first thing to do is to go into Map Common Events. You can click on that Recollection Events button and then go into Map Common Events. A Map Common Event is used in every map in the game. So if we go to Create Event here, you will have to select what type of event it is. We are going to make it an auto event. An auto event just happens anywhere. If there's no condition for an auto event, then it will happen the instant the map starts. So I hope you can see all of this on the screen. We're going to rename this support counter, because this is going to be the event that counts however many support points should be given to the units. So the condition for this event is going to be start of player phase, and it is going to, alright, so first things first, if you want to do supports the Path of Radiance way, where it counts however many battles the units participated in, you are going to have this happen only at the start of the turn, the start of the first turn. So turn 1 player phase. If you are doing it the GBA way, and I think this is used in a couple other games too, where the units will gain support points if they are sitting next to each other, then you are not going to have a turn condition here. You are going to just leave this box unticked. So what we are going to do is we're going to create an event command. It's going to be change variable, and you are going to select the variable that tracks however many points the characters have. I'm going to make it add 1, or add however many you want, really. You can make it so that different supports build faster or slower. It's up to you. So at the bottom of the window here, there's going to be this little tick box called trigger. Select it, and you can set a condition for the event command to actually work. So we only want support points to be built. In this case, if we're doing it the Path of Radiance way, we want both units to be on the field. So go over to Units, Add, and then select Helen, or whoever it is, and you are going to make the life condition alive, and the sortie state sortie. So, in order for this event command to play, Helen has to be alive and she has to be deployed. And there you go. And you're going to select the other unit in this pair. We're going to make it Lucy. Alive and sortied. And there you go. This will add 1 support point if Helen and Lucy are both alive and in the battle. Now, if you want to do it the GBA way, instead of using the unit conditions here, you will go over to Distance. You will select the unit, tick this box, and you can even make the range needed to build support points higher than 1 if you want, but select the target, Lucy, and then there you go. The command will trigger if Helen and Lucy are right next to one another. So that's another way you can do it too. Now, this will only run 1 time in 1 chapter, because whenever you run an event, it is flagged as completed. So what we have to do here is we have to unset that flag. So add this event command, go to Change Event State, and choose your event and set it to free. This will make it so that the event runs again when the condition is fulfilled. And in this case, that's the start of the first player phase. So yeah, that's all you have to do to make this event track however many battles or however many turns units have spent next to one another. You just have to add another event command for every pairing, and that's another reason why this can get out of hand. And yeah, you have to set up all of this manually too, because that's just how it is. There's no support system like built into the software already, so you have to manually set up all of this yourself, and that's why it can get very annoying. But I pulled it off myself, so you should be able to too. So now that we're tracking, I just want to make sure this is set up right. So now that we're tracking how we're tracking support points, so we're tracking however many battles a unit has participated in. So how do we get the actual conversations to play? Well, the first thing is we have to make the actual conversation, and these are the recollection events. If you want to have a little menu where you can review supports, like in the GBA games, they have a little menu where you can review supports between the characters, you're going to want to make a recollection event. That's what these events are for. So, Helen/Lucy C. And if you double click on your event, you can see that there are a bunch of settings for it. This software does have a possible menu for reviewing supports, and you can sort them all out by units, so you can select which units are part of it. Just make sure that this display on extra screen is ticked. Make sure this box is ticked. And I'm not sure if rank does anything actually. You can set an icon for it too. There are a bunch of icons. You can create your own as well. The icon will appear next to the item in the menu. And then for the recollection event here, you just go into, you just make the dialogue yourself. Yeah. So this would be where you would make the actual conversation in this menu here. So now that we have the recollection event, we're going to, now you have a choice to make. You can either make these conversations happen on the battlefield, or you can make them happen in bases like in Path of Radiance. So if you're going with the bases, my preference in fact, go into, this is the wrong menu, you go into base settings, and of course you have to set up a base as well. That's not going to be part of this video though. Go into events, and these are all of the events that happen in the base. So there are auto events, there are opening events, there are ending events, yeah. All of the stuff that you could also have in map events, you can also have in base events. So we're going to go into talk events, create the event, and rename it the same thing as the recollection event from earlier. And if you double click on it, Actually, I don't know what those do. You actually want to right-click on it, go to Details, and you can set this event to use a recollection event. That will play the recollection event when you trigger it in-game, but you can also have additional commands here for setting up variables and such. So the condition for this event to be possible is you're going to enable variable. We are going to have it check the list here. And then you just want to input, you're checking it against however many battles you want to have the units deployed in before they can have this talk. So it should be equal to or more 2. This will make the talk possible if they've been in 2 or more battles. And you can change all of this yourself. The other condition we want to set is the switch. So we want to go to our global switches here. And this is the C conversation, so you want it to only be possible to happen if the C switch is off. This will mean that the conversation hasn't happened yet. If it was a B conversation, you would want it to only be possible if C is on but B is off. And if it's the A, you want C and B to be on but A to be off. Yeah. And one more thing. If you are limiting the number of supports per unit, then you want to make sure that the switches for that are off as well. Because they can't have the conversation if the max has been hit, right? So you want the switches for that to be set to off if you want the conversation to happen. And then now as for the actual event commands, we are first going to make the command to turn on the switch for the conversation to mark that it's happened. We are going to change the, if you are limiting how many supports a unit can have, then you would want to add 1 to the variable that tracks how many supports they've had. And we'll do that for Lucy as well. Just set hers to. And then we want to make another change switch command that will turn on the switch that says, oh, the unit has reached the maximum number of supports. But we don't want it to always happen whenever this conversation is triggered, because it could only be the first conversation or the second conversation. So what you want to do is go to the event triggers, event conditions rather, on the right here. Again, in order to look at these, this little box down here at the bottom has to be checked. So go here. And the condition for the switch being turned on is that we want the maximum to equal 5, or it can be whatever you want it to be. You can tweak this however you want, if you want to customize this a little bit. So we'll just create the second command for the other unit. And I didn't put a limitation on the however many supports you could get on a single unit in my game, but if you want to do that yourself, this is how you would do it. Very simple. It's just the level of tedium is amazing because you have to do this for every conversation of every unit, and you can copy and paste these talk events and then just alter them to you know, do whatever you want them to. But it can still be very annoying if you have a very large number of supports. Like if all of this worked automatically and was like a system that the game already had in place, that would be great. That's how it works on GBA, if you're from a ROM hacking background like I am. Anyways, if you want this talk event to happen on the battlefield instead of in the base, then the same... then you would basically make the event the same, except you would put it in the map common events as a talk event. You would put it here instead of in the base events. Because then it could happen on any map. The two units would just have to talk to each other. In fact, let me briefly show how that would work, because talk events are a little different. You create the talk event. Here it would look the same as the base event that we just made. However, in the... let's see, it's a talk event, so you would go into talk target settings, and then you would use the 2 units that are involved in the support conversation. And you can also change the string to support if you want to let the player know that it's a support conversation. So yeah. And if you check this box that says either it can initiate, that means obviously either unit can start the conversation. So yeah, that's how all of that works. But there's one thing we're missing here. We have not created the actual support bonus for the units. So if we go to Database, Players, and then Details, let's see, does Helen have a support with Lucy? Well, we'll just add it ourselves. We go Helen. Oh wait, this is Helen, so she has to talk with Lucy. Yeah, you have to add this for both units involved. So we'll give her +1 POW and +1 defense for this, and then for the switches, this just lets you select which of the switches need to be on for the support to apply. So here you are. Just select the switch you want and you're good to go, and then do that for the other unit too. Now there's one minor annoyance to doing it this way. If you have a bonus set up for every conversation, like one separate bonus for every conversation switch, then each and every one of these is going to show up in the character sheet as they are activated. So you'll have like 3 different support bonuses with Lucy, even though like they're both the same character, and the game could just combine all of the bonuses into one to show that they're all the same character bonus thing. Yeah, it even confuses me. So if you want to avoid that, like you have to create yet another variable that tracks how many conversations the character has had with that particular unit, and then make the condition for the support bonuses like such and such variable is equal to 1 if they've had only 1 conversation, or 2 if they've only had 2 conversations. And then you have to like set all of the bonuses to what you want them to be at each stage of the support. So that can get very, very annoying. It's like another layer of annoyance just to make the character sheet less cluttered. But you know, I chose not to bother with that because it would have been even more annoying. But whatever you choose to do, that is up to you. Now, you may be wondering if affinities are a thing in SRPG Studio. They are not. So you have to set all of the support bonuses manually. You can't have them be based off of a character affinity, which is unfortunate, but that's the way it's going to have to happen if you don't have a plugin. So yeah, if there's a plugin that makes all of this easier, use that instead, but this is the method I came up with. And it gives you a decent idea of how to work with variables, switches, and events, all of that stuff. So if you've been following along and don't have any interest in actually doing this in your game, that's totally alright. The real purpose of this tutorial is just to teach you a little about how the events work, how they can intertwine with one another, and maybe you're interested in seeing how you can customize this system to make it work better for you, or how to do something completely different with your game. I'm going to touch upon a couple of things that I didn't talk about in the main part of the video. So, oh yeah. If you want a character's death to remove their supports, like in the GBA games, if a character dies, then naturally all of their supports would be gone, and the unit they were supporting with can have more conversations again. Go into the unit events, create a unit event, and there's a distinction here between dead and injured. Dead means permanently gone. Like, it's classic mode. Injured is for if you're playing on casual mode. This software has a casual mode implemented. Injured just means they got KO'd in that chapter and are coming back in the next one. Dead means permanently gone, so we are working with dead. So what you would want to do here is, in addition to the death quote, because this is also where the death quote would go, you would want to subtract 1 if the support switch is on, and then you would want to turn that switch off. I mean, you'd want to turn all the switches off anyways, but you'd also want to subtract 1 from the other characters if they supported with this character because she's now dead. So that's how that would work. Hopefully you understood that. Alright, so one more thing I'm going to touch on before I close out this video is, if you want to do something like Radiant Dawn, where anybody can support anybody, and the bonuses are all determined by affinity, you can do that with this very same system, but you have to add switches and variables for every possible unit, and the first support conversation has to erase any previous supports that the character may have had if it's with a different character. So if you've gotten this far in the video, I think you should be able to figure that out for yourself if you really want to do it that way. Again, like doing this through a plugin is probably much better if there's a plugin out there that this works for. So that's it for my tutorial on how to implement a support system in SRPG Studio without a plugin. Hopefully it was very easy to understand. This is the first time I've done a tutorial video for SRPG Studio. So I'll see you later if I decide to make another tutorial video for something else. Later.